All right, I just wanted to make a video about my journey of being a hobbyist photographer, where I've drawn inspiration from, what I get enjoyment out of, how I've challenged myself and some of the skills I've gained. Also, I wanted to express how absolutely don't let gear get in the way of, photography or your hobby. I'll explain on how that impacted me and how I noticed it through my journey as a hobbyist photographer. So the first camera I started shooting seriously on was an Olympus OM FSLR. So it was a film camera, and I got it for free as a college student because this is a time where people were really getting rid of all their film gear and transitioning over to digital. So there's a lot of budget, good film gear with nice glass that you could either get for free or super cheap. And so I happened to get an Olympus OM-2 FSLR with a Zucchio 50mm f1.8 prime lens, and also with a 35 to 200 millimeter lens and a box of old black and white film, 400 TX. It was a very nice film. I have 5 or 10 rolls of that film. And then, as I mentioned, I was a broken college student. My roommate at the time was really into photography and taught me a lot about photography 101, ISO, sensitivity of film, aperture, shutter speed, composition, light metering, things like that. And because I was shooting film, and each roll of film would have only 24 to 36 shots available on it, it made me very disciplined about making sure my light metering was correct. I remember the lens I was shooting on was a Zucchio, and it was a manual focus and a manual aperture. So it was very tactile, very involved shooting experience. The camera didn't do much for you, or for me, for that when I was shooting, and so I would have to be very involved in tracking my subject, making sure if the subject was coming to a place, moving, that by the time they came to the place, all my settings would be correct, including the focus. So I'd have to focus on something that was in approximate distance to where my subject would be. Make sure my lighting was correct, gauge how dark or light the subject is in relation to the surroundings, get the shutter speed set correctly for the speed of the subject was moving at. So all these things I would have to think about ahead, and I think that really made me a better photographer, a hobbyist for that matter, but it really taught me a lot and helped develop my skills, and had a great understanding of how aperture works and how shutter speed works and sensitivity and all those different things. And there would be a real cost to mistakes. You can't just, we're super spoiled now with some things like the R5 or digital cameras in general. You can just hold the shutter release down, electronic shutter, and shoot at 40 frames per second. On the R6 Mark II, on this R5, you can shoot at 20 frames per second, and that's just insane. I didn't have those type of crutches available when I first started shooting, not to mention the autofocus speed and accuracy, eye tracking. It's worlds and worlds different than when I first started shooting. But I'm really grateful for that experience. And my favorite pictures, a couple of my favorite pictures I've ever taken were with that Olympus OM-2 film camera with that 50mm prime manual Zucchio lens. And those are some of my most favorite and proud pictures I have to date, in spite of all the gear I've gone through. So in that case, the gear, in spite of it being all manual, didn't get in the way. And let me explain to that. It was about the same size as this, footprint-wise, with this lens, a nice compact 50mm lens, small, compact body about this size. I take it with me often and everywhere as a college student, taking biking trips, biking around the city. And so I always kind of had photography in the back of my mind because I physically had the camera with me, and I was always sizing up oh, would this be a good picture? Could I get that picture? And it was fun, and it was the best way to do it. After that camera, I ended up getting a Panasonic Lumix 12 megapixel point and shoot camera, which was also very fun to shoot with because it was compact, it was small. I took it with me everywhere, and it had all access to all of the manual settings, and so I could manually set ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and that also allowed me to do some other creative things, just shoot in unique lighting conditions, shoot unique subjects, have the camera available with me at times that were good photo opportunities that I might not have had it available with me otherwise. And so then after that Lumix, I got a Canon 60D with the 50 nifty EF lens. And I remember really having fun shooting with that body. The battery would last forever. And it was also a small footprint. And going to that camera from, the Lumix point and shoot and the film Olympus was just night and day. And that nifty 50 was compact, so I would take the camera with me just about everywhere. And so that was very enjoyable shooting experience. Now the hobby took a back seat when the gear started getting in the way, and I'll explain that in a second. So the next camera body I started shooting after the 60D was a 6D Mark II, full frame camera, excellent camera, great sensor, took great pictures, but I don't remember enjoying shooting on that body as much, not because of the body, but because at the same time I bought the 6D Mark II, I bought these three lenses. I'd finally gotten a job, and I had some money, so I bought these three lenses, and I still had the nifty 50 from the 60D, but I would never want to use the nifty 50 because I had this Sigma 50mm art 1.4 lens. Again, nifty 50. Why would I ever take that nifty 50 if I have this art lens? So I felt guilty about ever shooting with a nifty 50 because I have the Sigma art lens that was clearly optically superior. But the downside was it's big, it's heavy, it takes better pictures, but I just didn't. This coupled with the 6D Mark II was a really large footprint. And so I didn't find myself taking my camera out as often just because it was clunky. I would have to think twice, do I really want to carry around a couple pounds of camera gear if I'm not sure if I'm going to be actually taking pictures? And so the camera just didn't go out with me as often. And then when it did, I would always have one of these three lenses attached to it, which is fine. But these zoom lenses, they were just larger, a little bit more cumbersome to carry around. If I'm doing an activity like hiking or biking, I'd be more scared. Not to mention the weight, I'd also be a little bit more scared about banging up these lenses because this is probably close to $4,000 to $5,000 worth of glass alone. And so I became a little bit more timid about my use, and I didn't take my camera out as often. And even if I wouldn't think about taking it out with the nifty 50 because I feel guilty about not using one of my nicer lenses that I'd spent money on. And so I would suggest don't get caught up in the gear because the gear kind of got in the way at that point. Even though it's nicer glass, it was just heavier and harder to use. I didn't use my camera as much. And as a hobbyist photographer, it's more important to have your camera out with you and have, just take pictures and have more shoot in different lighting conditions and different situations to improve my skills and make it a challenge. And so I actually, at the same time as owning the 6D Mark II, I bought the Canon M3. It's a mirrorless camera with a 24.2 megapixel sensor, and that was awesome. It was super compact. It took great pictures. The image quality was excellent, and it was real small. But the thing is, in order to I bought the adapter as well to adapt it to the EFM to the EF mounts, and so I could use these lenses with it. And I would run into the same problem again, because then I would be taking these clunky pieces, these heavy pieces of lens places. So I actually bought the Pancake 22 millimeter lens for that Canon M3. And I would take that around, and I was taking it out more often, but I didn't quite, that 22 millimeter focal length didn't quite speak to me. It just distorted pictures like I didn't like. And the other thing about the M3, not all of the aperture ISO and shutter speed settings were super accessible as they are on these larger cameras. Like with this, and when I'm shooting in manual mode, I can adjust aperture ISO and shutter speed with all these dials right here without having to go into any menus. With right up to my eye, I can adjust it right then and there. And so eventually, I just didn't take my camera out as much. It wasn't as enjoyable because, again, the gear was kind of getting in the way of the hobby, and I would lose a little bit of photo opportunities, and I lost a little bit of inspiration. Then the RF came along, or I'm sorry, the R5 came along with the RF lens mounts, and I kind of just went for it. I bought this RF5 body. I consider against an R6, and these are phenomenal bodies. But what I also did is I bought the native RF 50 millimeter Nifty 50, and this is optically, I believe, superior to the EF version, and it's super fast. Maybe the autofocus is fast because of the RF body, but most importantly, the footprint is just small, compact, and easy to take with me. And I find myself grabbing this setup and taking it with me just as often as I did when I was using my 60D with the Nifty 50, just as often as I did when in the past before I bought all this nice glass. Do I still use this glass? Absolutely. But I've also come to realize that. And so I'm okay leaving I don't feel guilty anymore about leaving this Sigma art behind and just shooting with the Nifty 50. In fact, I've even compared pictures from between these two lenses, and unless you're looking super closely, it's not as apparent as I thought it was. And of course, this does take better pictures. There's no doubt. This is close to optically perfect glass as you can get. This Sigma Art 50 millimeter 1.4 is fantastic glass. And I will still use it, and I will take it out when I know I'm going somewhere where there are going to be cool photo opportunities. I have time. I'm not hiking or biking, and I'm not sure whether and I am sure I will be using the camera, and I want you to use this creative prime lens. I'll take it. If I want to shoot like in a event where I know I'm going to take a camera, I know there's going to be photo opportunities, I might need to zoom in and out and have different focal lengths, I'll take this. If I want to do portraits, I'll take this lens. But the big thing is, as a hobbyist now, I think it's much easier in terms of size and ergonomics to take it with this small Nifty 50. And so that's my journey through being a hobby photographer, and what barriers I've went through, and how at times the gear did get in the way a little bit, and how I came to that realization and the terms I came to. But long story short, get something that fits you, that suits your style of shooting, that's fun for you, and most importantly, that the gear doesn't get in the way, and that you find yourself wanting to use it, and you take it with you, and it lends to taking pictures in different settings where, again, the gear's not in the way, and it's just fun for you. And that's going to be different for everyone. There may be someone that absolutely loves wildlife, and instead of using this RF 100 to 400 little one, they want to take the 500 millimeter prime. That's okay. Just that's what their enjoyment. That's what makes them tick. That's great. For some people, it may just be using a cell phone. That's great as well. It's always on your person. For some people, it may be doing budget photography, seeing for $100, $200 budget, what is the best picture they can take. And I've even considered that as well. For example, like the Canon T2i, from my recollection, was a fantastic camera. It had the same sensor, it has the same sensor, I think, as the 60D I used to shoot on. But the size of that body was just so tiny, so ergonomic, and just so lightweight that it never got in the way. And the fact that 18.1 megapixel sensor takes similar, if near similar pictures as the 60D is just mind-blowing. And I think it's an excellent camera, even for anybody who's getting into photography and wants to try it out. I would wholeheartedly suggest don't get an R6, don't get a R6 Mark II or an R5. Go and get a used Canon T2i, a couple kit lenses, or even the T2i with the EF Nifty 50 should possibly set you back less than $300, less than $200, and will give you an amazing shooting experience with all the manual controls, great quality pictures, and you can really see if it's fit for you. You can learn what your style of shooting is, what focal lengths do you like, what of interest to you, and that's what it's all about, in my opinion. So hopefully that helped. I just felt like I wanted to share that perspective. Take care. Thanks for watching.